Our bell ringer today has pretty much 3 of the questions that you really need to know how to do that we've seen before. Remember again that in this situation, these 2 are obviously closest. This is a tag along. It's almost as if 2 and X are on a date and 3 is just one of the friends. So they're going to get rid of the friend first. And then we get rid of our 2 by dividing, getting the answer of X equals 2. Make sure you're showing that work. Again, showing that work is where you're going to earn your points. Now the difference in this is that in this situation, because X and 4 are completely separated from 5, that 5 obviously has to have the weakest attachment. That makes sense to me that 2 of the best friends would be in one location, where someone that they don't care as much about would be at a different location. So you get rid of this 5. Because it's divided by 5, we have to multiply by 5 first. Those 2 things go away and everything on the top comes down. So X plus 4 comes down with 2 times 5, which equals 10. From there, you do what you've been trained to do, which is subtract 4, gain the answer of X equals 6. Next, you are going to look at the fact that it, again, seems similar to this one, but it's different in the fact that the 5 was completely on the other side. That's why we got rid of it. Well, in this one here, they're both in their own fraction, and the 4 is, again, just added or subtracted to that fraction, which means that that 4 is actually your weakest attachment. From there, the way you get rid of a number on the bottom that's being divided is by multiplying by that number. So times 3 times 3, those 2 things go away, and X is equal to 15. And in today's work, it is going to be important you know how to add, subtract, and do all the things with fractions. So let's check this out. Remember that if you don't know what you're doing, the easiest thing to do is to multiply across the bottom to get your denominator. To bring this number up diagonally and bring that number up diagonally, we mean that 3 times 3 turns into 9, 2 times 4 turns into 8, and then 9 plus 8 is 17 over 12, which is the answer to that question. So all those things are important, especially as we get into our next chapter, which is chapter 2. Last semester we spent 2 quarters learning the basics of solving. This week we're going to review 1-step and 2-step equations, and we're going to learn to incorporate fractions. Pretty much this lesson is meant to break down each type of problem. Remember that solving is very repetitive. If you remember last semester, you saw the same types of problems, and once you got them, they became boring. Those of you who didn't get them, it's just because you never worked to get them, because again, they are very repetitive. Once you work to understand the general strategy, everything else gets simpler. Be sure to take notes on the types of problems that are confusing for you. So when you see something you don't understand, copy that question down, because in your classwork there will probably be another question just like it with different numbers. For example, if you're copy down the equation for 2x plus 1 equals 7, that is the same as the work for 3x plus 2 equals 11. It's the same as 5x plus 3 equals 18. It's the same as 4x plus 5 equals 25. Each of these is solved the same. Subtract this number first, and then divide by that number second. It's the same exact thing. So again, take notes on this or copy down the question that we do, so that when you see it, you have at least a hint as to how you're supposed to do it, and then hopefully use that to study for the test, so that you'll be ready to do it, perform that on the end of the week. We should understand how to do 1-step addition and subtraction. The idea is to use the opposite operation from what's being shown. 2 examples here. For example, shouldn't be that bad. X minus 8 is equal to 3. You want to move that 8. It's being subtracted, so we add 8 to both sides. X comes down, and 3 plus 8 is 11. On the other hand, X plus 5 is 10. You want to move that 5. It's being added, so we subtract 5 from both sides, and X is equal to 5. That's all. All right. This quarter, though, you're going to see the same types of problems with fractions as stated earlier. The process is the same. Just keep that in mind as we look at the new problems, which is here. So again, x plus 3/5 equals 3. We need to move the 3/5. Sure, it's a fraction, but it's being added, which means that what we do is we subtract 3/5. And so what we might have to do is go off to the side and put 3 minus 3/5. Remember, it doesn't work with subtraction, so we're going to do it the other way, which is we turn that into a fraction. We multiply across the bottom, which means it meets at 5. Bring that number up, which makes 15 minus 3, or 12 over 5, which is what we bring back over here now as we are showing our patience. Again, our scratch work when you don't know something, this is like what you type into the calculator. You want to know what 3 minus 3/5 is, so you do the work, you get your answer, and you bring that answer back to where you need it. That is the reason why your scratch work needs to go in one area, so you can practice actually organizing yourself. But that's it. Like everything else the same. That's just like the problem we did where it was plus, so we put a minus. Just like this one here is x minus 2/3 is 1/6. It's minus 2/3, so we simply add 2/3. X comes down, we need to do 1/6 plus 2/3, which means 3 and 6 meet at 18. Bring up the 3, bring up the 6, that turns into 3, that turns into 12, that makes 15 out of 18. Recognizing that 15 and 18 can be divided by 3, that actually equals 5/6, which means that that is our final answer. Again, your scratch work is used to get the answer, but everything else we did is the same as the problems that we just did earlier before this section. You see a plus, subtract it. You see a minus, you see a plus, you subtract it. You see a minus, you add it. All right. One-step multiplications also were practiced last quarter, should be last quarter, not last week, where it was 6 times x is equal to 30, so we divided by 6, and we got x equals 5. That's 2 times x equals 14, so we divide by 2, and we got x equals 7. Again, this quarter's problems will be doing the same thing, but just with fractions. And you just have to make sure you keep your discipline. Again, looking at this, it's 2/5 times x. What we do is we divide by 2/5. We divide by 2/5. These two things go away, x comes down. The problem is this style of problem doesn't look familiar to us, but it's just saying 1/2 divided by 2/5, which is what I'm going to write. That then sets us up to be a multiplication problem, because remember we keep, change, flip, so it's actually 1/2 times 5/2, which is across the top, across the bottom, 5/4. Now, just for the sake of proof, just to show you, 1/2 divided by 2/5, and it's typed in just like what we did before. You got your 1/2 on top of 2/5, and you notice that your answer is 5/4, just like we found. So that's why I'm saying that you really don't need the calculator. It does make things easier, I get that, but there's no need to rush this semester, because what we're trying to do this semester is work on our math skill set. At this point, you know you've seen enough topics to be ready to pass the next 2 years, but you need to make sure you work on your patience. You need to make sure you work on showing the steps and being able to write everything that's there. 4/5 times x. Again, in this case, we divide by 4/5. We divide by 4/5. These two things cancel out, obviously, and we're going to do 10 divided by 4/5, which is the same as 10 times 5/4. Now, if you remember, whole number times a fraction, you send the whole number to the top. That'll be 50/4. But notice that both of these are even, so that means it equals 25/2, because you can cut them both in half. That's the thing you have to look out for. But again, it's what you got to look out for all quarter, all semester, because if you're not using calculators, now you got to think a little bit, and you got to make sure you keep checking every single fraction to make sure that it cannot be reduced. But outside of that, that's really the only stuff that you have to worry about that's weird, I think. We'll see. Two-step equations. Most of our two-step equations follow the pattern of moving the added subtracted value first. I think we talked about that last semester. That's because we're trained to move the weaker value, and in the order of operations, multiplication and division are stronger than addition and subtraction, which means usually you will get rid of addition and subtraction. So in this situation, again, visually, those two are literally right next to each other. This is being added on, so you're going to get rid of that number first, the way we did before, by subtracting, because it's added. Just don't forget to bring down the full 4x, and whatever that is, 21 minus 5 is 16. Again, use your fingers if you got to count. And then you get rid of the 4 by dividing. The only difference between this and the first section is that you got to make 2 choices instead of 1. But as long as you're careful rewriting everything that you didn't get rid of, you should be okay. Again, b is the same thing. That's x divided by 2 minus 3 is 7. Visually, these two are in their own fraction. These two are already in their own group, and 3 is just there, which means that we're going to move that 3, again, by using the opposite operation, which in this case is addition. And then we get rid of that divided by 2 by multiplying by 2, getting us our answer of x equals 20. Again, not a tough problem. Just make sure you're careful in terms of thinking about it. The other two-step equation is set up differently. In this one, the denominator is actually separated from everything in the numerator, and because of this, it should make sense that that denominator has to have the weakest attachment, because as I said earlier, if these are 3 people and you're wondering who the best friends are, these two obviously are the best friends because they are together, whereas this person over here is separated from everybody and on their own. So since we have to move the weaker one, this is going to be the weaker one, and since it's divided by 4, you want to multiply by 4. It's just like the bell ringer. Those two things go away and everything on the top comes down. It does help to kind of cross out the parts you're getting rid of whenever you're doing that and you can't visualize it. And then we of course get rid of the 5 by subtracting 5, getting the answer of x equals 7. So in this, we are going to use the rest of the hour to practice problem solving. Again, the key thing that it comes down to is decision making. Use your notes. Again, hopefully you copied something on this stuff that you know you need, and just be sure to ask about anything that you're having issues with. Again, you can email me at any time and I will respond. You can't bother me with an email because I have do not disturb on my phone, which means if you email me too late, I won't get it until I wake up, and then I'll read it and then I'll respond. So either way, I'm going to respond as soon as I can. But this does represent everything for this week except for one question you're going to see on your homework, but that's it. So same as usual. If you're at home, I'd say work on 1 and 2 and then pause the video, work on 1 and 2, and then see if what you did is right. Here we go. First off, you should be subtracting 8 because it is the weaker one. Those are together. This is your tag along, so 2x equals 12. Then you divide by 2, getting x equals 6. Again, if something is different on that, you don't know what's going on, send me an email, ask me a question. On this one, again, these two make a fraction, which means that's your tag along there. So add 2 to make this go away. X over 3 comes down with 6, and to get rid of that divided by 3, you will multiply by 3, getting x equals 18. All right. So again, feel free to pause the video to see what you need to see, so you can try to see if you know it on your own for 3 and 4. And here we go. This is no different. You are still going to move this number first, the same way as usual. That's a -5, so you're going to add 5. Just be careful to make sure you recognize that negative 3x comes down with 12. But now, since it's negative 3 attached to x, you're going to divide, because it's negative 3 times x, you're going to divide by a negative 3. Keeping in mind that whenever you multiply or divide and the signs are different, that your answer is negative, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now there is another way to do that if you don't like that. And that is, anytime you have a negative number attached to x, you simply switch both sides. And then from there, you divide by 3. And negative 12 divided by 3 obviously is negative 4. This represents 12 negatives separated into 3 groups. It would be 4 negatives per group. And then here's the other one that some of you don't like, which is, again, the fraction one. Those two are together, which means this obviously is your tag along. Get rid of the 3 by multiplying because it's being divided. These two things cancel out. X minus 6 comes down with 6. And then you move your 6 by adding it. And that is that. All right. Go ahead and check out numbers 5 and 6 if you haven't already. Again, x plus 3/5 equals 2. The only thing that makes this anywhere near intimidating is the fraction, but the steps should be easy enough to understand. I expect that you can at least show me that you're going to subtract 3/5 before you do the rest of it. Maybe you don't know how to subtract 3/5, but you should at least be able to write that. And write the x equals. The only thing we have to do now is figure out what 2 minus 3/5 is. So in order to do that, we have to turn that into a fraction and go through the process we've been working on for the last couple weeks. 5 goes up diagonally, 1 goes up diagonally, 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 1 is 3, 10 minus 3 is 7, so 7 over 5 is your answer. But that's it. All right. X minus 2/3 equals 1/6. Again, the only thing that makes this tough is the fact that there are fractions, but it's still X minus 2/3, which means we want to add 2/3 to both sides to get X alone. So we should at least be able to get that part. Now maybe you don't know how to do 1/6 plus 2/3, which is what that means, but we should be okay. Again, I'm not teaching it the way for students who know what they're doing. Of course, the students who know what they're doing would put 6's at the bottom and rename this. But again, for those who don't, multiply across the bottom. Bring this number up, bring that number up. That becomes 3, that becomes 12, that becomes 15 over 18. Hold on real quick. Had to sneeze and didn't want to break the microphone again. Key thing is 15 over 18 can both be divided by 3, which is 5 over 6. And there we go. All right. Number 7, 5, 6x equals 3. Again, looking at this and trying to identify the operation is a matter of just, again, look at it and identify the operation. That's 5, 6 times x. So that means we want to divide by 5 over 6. These two things go away. 3 divided by 5, 6 is what I'm looking at, which means I'm actually doing 3 times 6 over 5, which means I'm sending 3 up to the 6, which is 18 over 5, which is my final answer. Now, all this worksheet did in class was it repeated the same questions again, so I'm not going to worry about those. What I will do is go to the ones that were outside of your reach just to make sure you saw them. At the very end, 15 and 16 were these two problems, kind of previewing what's going on next week as I like to do. So if you're paying attention, make sure you see this. All this is doing is incorporating the distributive property where you should start out by putting 2x plus 6 equals 8. But once you do that, this now becomes a two-step equation, which we just ended up doing. So this isn't a solving step, this is a simplify step, because simplify means write it in a better way. Once you write it in a better way, now we solve it. Same thing here. 4x plus 2 plus 3x, that's not something we've solved before, but based off of what we've practiced, we know we should be putting 4x and 3x together to make 7x. And then bringing down to plus 2. From there, notice it is again a two-step equation. What I tried to tell you earlier is that solving is very repetitive. So once you kind of get the idea, it becomes extremely easy. People get degrees in math and they solve every single year, but what you find out after you actually get solving down is that the solving doesn't get tougher. The other things get tougher, which is why you need to just go ahead and knock this out so you can get what you need out of it. Outside of that, appreciate your time. Again, email me if there's any questions, and good luck with everything.